I think bad things can happen in stories that make stories captivating because, nobody really wants to read a story where like, oh, here's a world and everything was good and nothing bad ever happened. We want bad things to happen because that creates conflict. Conflict drives stories or whatever. But I think there is a very fine line between having bad things happen and having characters suffer.
Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to the Queer Vision podcast. I am your co-host, Coe, and this is,
Hi, I'm Becca.
and we are the Queer Vision podcast and the co-founders of Queer Alina. Today, we sat down with Justin Epps to talk about comics,
More about
more
comics.
about
We
comics,
learned a lot about
and more
comics
about comics, and writing for comics.
and how Justin got interested in comics.
Yeah. So really, this is a comic-based episode, but there's still good stuff to pull from it. We talk about art. We talk about the nuances of how art reflects society and what's happening at that moment.
We talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So you should actually listen, learn things about comics, or if you already love comics, just enjoy.
Period. Thank you so much for sitting down with us on the Queer Vision today. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm Coe. This is
Hi, I'm Becca.
and we're the co-host. Usually we just start out having you just tell a little bit about yourself, your name, all that fun stuff, and just let the viewers know a little bit about you.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, first, thanks for having me again. This is the first interview that I think I've done. So, which is weird because I work as a comics journalist, so I've done
Oh
the
wow.
interviewing, but never so much the interviewee section. It's definitely weird to kind of give up that kind of power. It's like, okay, well now I'm gonna like just you guys and put myself in your hands. No, yeah. So my name's Justin. a I'm a writer for comicbook.com. That's a very new addition to my life. I just
Oh
started there
wow.
about a month ago. Cover content, comic content. I've been writing professionally for about 3 to 4 years or so. Comics, huge passion of mine. I've recently taken that passion, put it into from writing into short form video content. Started a TikTok channel, The Coyote Gospel, which
Mm.
is essentially the same thing that I'm doing in my writing, just channeling my passion for comics, talking about updates, features, goings on, anything about that I just find interesting in the comic world with all the creative freedom that I want. Because the thing is, when you write for entities, you kind of have no choice about what you want to cover. You have to kind of track the trends of fandom. But with this, it's literally just like, hey, I find this interesting. I want to talk about this. And I do.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's been really fun, shifting from writing to video content,
Mhm.
different beast, but it's interesting, especially just connecting with people because people can say what they want about the algorithms that kind of dictate our
Mhm.
lives or whatever, but they do really connect you with people that really kind of vibe with you, which I found so interesting.
Mhm.
That's probably the best thing about shifting to TikTok recently.
I love that.
Yeah. I also I'm definitely not as in it as much as you are, but I love there's always been such a space in my heart for comics. Even though I haven't really read a lot even, it's just something about the style, something about it, I don't know, feels so intrinsically queer to me. And I don't know. It's just interesting to I've never heard of anybody who's done comic journalism. So I'm just really intrigued to hear more about everything.
Yeah, what exactly goes into comic journalism?
I think with what we consider comics journalism is rooted in the larger entertainment journalism that we've seen be a more 21st century development, just with a sense that fandom is such a big, all encompassing thing nowadays. I mean, there's
Mhm.
video game journalism, there's a television journalism, movie journalism. It's definitely part of a larger just entertainment journalism thing. But when you dig down into the niches or whatever, and then there's niches within niches. So technically you could say this is just an offshoot of literature people who cover
Mhm.
literature or whatever. Mine is more hyper focused into the comic section because, yeah, it is just something that has vibed with me almost my entire life. And I think how I see comic journalism is, I'll say this. I don't consider myself like a hardened reporter, those who go I'm not on the beats constantly tracking down with little notepads, following up on leads or whatever. Really, it's just hey, what's going on? What happened in the latest issue of Superman? What's going on with the Avengers right now? And, there's news stories. Sometimes there are really good news stories that pick up, which I do get a chance to talk about. One of the most recent kind of developments we had. And it's all about finding what is news and what is sensationalism. And I think sometimes with
Mm.
Mhm.
entertainment, it does kind of all get mixed into each other. But I do think there are sometimes you just realize, hey, this is part of a bigger conversation. This is a bigger issue that I want to talk about. And because this is my niche, this is my passion, I've got the wherewithal to kind of give people, hey, this is the context. This is why it matters. And this is why I think it's important or cool or necessary to talk about. One thing we had recently go on in kind of the comics community that I did a few videos on was Daniel Warren Johnson, who's a really fantastic, amazing artist. If you've never seen his work, did the recent Transformers comic for Image Comics, which is also really good.
Mhm.
But he worked on a recent issue of, there's a title, Absolute Batman. But in the weeks leading up to that, Johnson, for context, is a Chicago native, I believe, or at least he lives in Chicago, which, as we all know,
Oh.
has been inundated with ICE recently, as many communities
Mhm.
are. So, right about a week or so before New York Comic Con, a sketch posted online that Johnson was selling at New York Comic Con, which showed this version of Batman, Absolute Batman, choking an ICE agent, which started a
Mhm.
very big conversation online. And again, for more context, because I feel like I say these things and I know exactly what it means. Absolute Batman is essentially a title that's set in an alternate universe, a darker world. Still
Mhm.
Batman, but it's a Batman that is more relatable, I guess, for lack of a better word. He doesn't have
Mhm.
wealth. He's a very class conscious hero. He's a more grounded, sort of like relevant to this continuity. And I could talk about all the stuff
Mhm.
like absolute stuff later, but content wise, yeah, this version of Batman would be the type to kind of go up and say, like, hey, I'm seeing, a corrupt, organization going after people. I'm going to
Mhm.
choke out of this person. That sketch alone just kind of made a huge mudslide out of, like, I mean, I mean, don't get me wrong, the people who recognized what it was were into it.
Mhm.
But some people took this as like this makes comics woke. These people are ruining comics by making
Mhm.
stuff woke. And it's one of those things I roll my eyeballs every time I think about it because, as you said earlier, comics are inherently kind of a little queer, a little alternative. They
Mhm.
always have kind of catered to more, pushing back against the system or whatever. So
Mhm.
most people, the people that I know in my community, we had no problem with it. But obviously, something like
Mhm.
that happens, it becomes a dialogue. It becomes an issue that necessitates conversation and talking about it, which is what I try to do and step in with my analysis and my critiques and my videos.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I think I've seen this rhetoric everywhere on TikTok that like all art is a protest. Like for a while there, women weren't allowed to read. So women reading is a protest. Doesn't matter if it's smut or if it's educational. The fact that you even get to choose what you want to read is a protest. If you want to read a comic, if you want to read a manual, doesn't matter. So I think that's to your point.
It's actually really interesting you're talking about that. I just wrote a piece for comicbook.com. It hasn't gone up yet. I'm not totally in charge of when everything can go up, but literally we had an issue of a series called The Ultimates, which is essentially like an Avengers, but in another universe. Marvel and DC both have been doing
Mhm.
this thing recently where they have these alternate universes that are darker, run by corrupt power structures. And I think the reason they've been so popular right now is because, like, oh, wow, I think we can all kind of relate to that a little bit. But it's a really good, like, the writer, Dennis Camp, literally took this entire issue just to have one of the main characters make a speech, that essentially was a speech to his world, but also to the reader saying, like, what's going on right now. There's a reason for what's going on right now. The reason we feel so helpless, the reason we want to escape reality is that there is a system that is kind of designed to keep us like this, people at the top wanting to oppress those at the bottom. It doesn't have to be this way. It had these really strong issues of strong themes of class consciousness, solidarity, strikes, power to the people, that sort of stuff. And I think, we're at a point, I think, especially now, where people are recognizing, like, how politically aware comics have been, why they
Mhm.
resonate with people, why they're resonating so much more now. And I just find it so interesting that it's becoming so it's a good thing that it's so ubiquitous, you know what I mean? Because we are recognizing
Mhm.
that yes, art is political, comics are political. There are people who will tell you that they're not then, but we had Captain America punching Hitler as early as his first appearance. So,
Mhm.
What got you into comics in the first place?
oh man, it's one of those things where it's just like, I don't know. It's like,
Mhm.
a football fan get into football? How does
Mhm.
like a dance person really get into dance? It's just one of those things that gravitates towards you. You know what I mean? I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like superheroes do have this sort of broad appeal. I mean, like, when you're a
Mhm.
kid, everybody likes Spider-Man, everybody likes Batman, everybody likes, I, it's one of those things where, like, I feel like I don't want to heighten up the 90s as being like the generation, but when you're a 90s baby, everybody who was like, that was the best generation. We had the best cartoons, we had the best movies or whatever. And I grew up in the height of Batmania. You know what I mean? Not
Mhm.
Batman the movie came out a year before I was born, but the way what that movie did and like pump new life into Batman really did kind of like cause the sort of like environment that I was just brought up in. You know what I mean? Like there was the 10 bedroom Batman movies did kind of go on for a little bit throughout the 90s. There was also Batman animated series. There was not as much, I mean, like it's not as the landscape was not as dominated by superheroes as they are now. Now I feel it's just like there's so many regular superhero stuff. There's deconstructionist superhero stuff. It's so much more populated now. But I guess just the elements that I saw growing up, the Batman stuff, that was obviously one of the biggest ones. But that was really just more of like a general sort of introduction or whatever. Comics, when I think about like what actually got me into comics as a literature form, as an art form, that really didn't happen until I was in college. Now,
Mhm.
again, that through line of being interested in superheroes has always been a part of my life. But it really wasn't until that I started to like seek out materials like, hey, I'm trying to remember what the storyline that actually got me into comics, or is that like, hey, start going to my local comic shops. That's a little harder to recall off the top of my head. But I will say I do know the exact like books that did inspire me to see comics as more than just superheroes punching bad guys or the hype aura moments that people want to post to social media or whatever. That I credit to Grant Morrison, the writer Grant Morrison, who is without a doubt my favorite comic book author. If you're not familiar, they've written books like Animal Man, Doom Patrol. They had this really amazing run on Batman, which that I think probably was what got me because again, that through line of Batman is like, oh, who's writing Batman right now? This author. What else has this author done? These books. What are these books?
Mhm.
Oh, these are transcendentalist contemplations on superhero literacy and just what it means and everything. But really, I did a video about this too early, and I think just because this is on my mind, that's where it's going. But Animal Man is a story by Grant Morrison, which was they brought this character back from the '60s. Hadn't really done too much. Said like, hey, I'm just going to reinvent this character at during the '80s, which was a very, if you guys are familiar with stuff like Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns, these very deconstructionist takes, these darker takes. Morrison brought this hero back to kind of essentially do a whole anti version of that. They put this character through the ringer of this story as a giant sort of contemplation on how do we treat fictional characters? What is like, is it ethical to make characters suffer? And I thought what they did with this story was amazing. It was deeper than anything else I had read. It really showed me that, hey, using this combination of very introspective themes and really amazing art or whatever, these stories, because I'll say this, as somebody with ADHD, I've always struggled with very dense books.
Hmm.
So, when you have the good looking pictures alongside to kind of like, really give me these themes of like, that I hadn't really thought about before, it was a lot easier to digest. Not saying Grant Morrison's work is digestible. They're a very
Detailed.
they go for a lot of stuff. They do a lot
Mm.
of like, it's not, I would not recommend Grant Morrison for a first time comic readers. Like I would start with more
Mhm.
like basics over stuff or whatever, because their work is very intense. I did it, but I was also just like, throw anything at me. But no, I'd say that story really just kind of sparked a bigger desire to read and consume comics in a way that I just wasn't before. In fact, Animal Man is where I got my TikTok handle, the Coyote Gospel, from. It was from an
Mm.
issue, I think the fifth issue, where Morrison did this entire like parody of Looney Tunes, which sounds weird, but the idea was that like it ties into the grander theme of, is it ethical to create suffering, even if it's fictional, which ties into the greater
Mhm.
themes of what writers were doing to characters at the time, where they were putting them through darker things, where they were killing characters, where they were putting sexual assault in comics. It was a very anti, like, are we right to do this or whatever? And,
Mhm.
seeing a writer do that with comics really kind of made me want to engage with them more, make them a bigger part of my life, write my own stuff. Yeah, that foray from Grant Morrison really is what kind of made me want to make comics a much more important part of my life.
Wow. So pretty similar to like whenever you find your favorite author randomly and
Essentially,
you're
yeah,
like,
that's
this is it.
long-winded. That's the
This is
easy
it.
way to say it.
Okay.
That's my long-winded way of saying like a very simple thing. I found this writer that I like.
It's the ADHD way, don't worry. Okay,
Comedy.
so going back then, what is your take on the ethical suffering of the characters? Like, is that ethical? Is that not ethical? How do you feel about that then?
You're never going to write a story, I believe, where bad thing or let me phrase it. I think bad things can happen in stories that make stories captivating. Because, nobody really wants to read a story where like, oh, here's a world and everything was good and nothing bad ever happened. We want bad things to happen
Yeah.
because that creates conflict. Conflict drives stories or whatever. But I think there is a very fine line between having bad things happen and having characters suffer.
Mm.
As a comics, reader, somebody who's like a student of comics or whatever, you really learn a lot about where that line is for a lot of people, because everybody's degree of like, like what is too far for comics varies. Some people don't like when characters are beaten up. You know what I mean? Some people don't like when
Mm.
it's a character that has a history of being beaten up. Some people don't like it when it's characters that have a history of violence, whatever kind of violence in their history, when they are, put through different ringers or whatever. It's a sliding scale, I would say. And I also think like, especially with comics, which has a very a history of, I don't know if either of you are familiar with the term fridging, but that's where that term comes from. Fridging is this phrase coined by Gail Simone, another of my favorite authors, which is essentially tying into an issue that was very ubiquitous in the 80s and 90s where female characters were often killed and were like made to suffer for the advancement of
Mm,
a male character's
Mm,
story. And
mhm,
that phrase comes from an issue of Green Lantern where a villain killed Green Lantern's girlfriend and stuffed her body in a fridge. So over the top,
mm,
so
mhm,
wild. People are like, what? Or whatever. So no, I don't think you really need to make a character. I don't like the shock value. I'll say that. I think
mm,
shock value is just that. It gives you the moment where it's just like, I can't believe this happened or whatever. But
mhm,
it takes a very, very skilled author to pull that off and have it mean more than just shock value. But as to your point, like that, like do I feel that characters need to suffer? I don't say they need to suffer. I don't think that we should avoid bad things outright or whatever. Light touch. I mean, like I've read stories where I'm like, I don't really like where this character happened, but it worked. You know what I mean? And it's one
mhm.
of those things where you just kind of know it when you see it. So yeah, I don't know. It's it's one of those things where I feel like you just know it when you see it. That's the best way to say it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's very fair.
No, I think that makes sense though too, like because yeah, with any kind of story, like walking that line is so important, right? And I agree. I think it makes it more meaningful when it isn't just like just the shock value. Because I've definitely seen things where it's like, oh, this was like, even in like movie culture and stuff, where people are always talking about a movie and it's like this movie is just like really weird.
Yeah.
Like that's all. Like there's nothing more to it. You
Like,
know?
what's the one with the guy with the mask that has all the swirls on it?
Oh, Saw? The Saw movie?
Jigsaw?
Saw,
Yeah.
Saw?
Well, that's the
saw.
thing is like, like as you were talking about that, I was thinking like horror. I mean, that is an entire genre of film that is predicated on, suffering and the thing of it or
Mhm.
whatever. And I guess it's really a matter of like, what are you trying to do with your story? What are you trying to say with your
Yeah.
story? Because I'll say
Hmm.
this, I am a horror fan. I do like horror
Hmm.
or whatever, but I also don't look to it for strong characterization, stories with strong
Mhm.
themes or whatever. It really is. I don't want to say it's like a shut your mind up because I do think there is really well done horror or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would say like I look for different things when it comes to superhero, when it look
Mhm.
fiction, and when it comes to horror. When it comes to horror, I
That makes
expect
sense.
suffering. I expect people to die
Mhm.
in gruesome ways. I mean, I'll,
Right.
I watched all the Terrifier movies or whatever. And if you want to talk about suffering in fiction, that is probably the worst I've ever seen, more than any Saw movie. But I wouldn't want any of that stuff in a superhero story or whatever. I mean,
Mhm.
Right.
especially because superhero stories do have this like history, like I said, in the 90s when people were just like violently killed when, they would introduce sexual
Mhm.
assault for no reason. A lot of people don't like The Killing Joke, which is one of it's hyped up as a great Batman story, and it is, but a huge part of it is that Batgirl, well, she wasn't Batgirl at the time, but Barbara Gordon is shot by the Joker in a very theme.
Mhm.
And it ties into that fridging issue. Joker shot her because he was trying to make her father suffer. So again, I mean, it really depends on, what are you trying to do with your story? What are you trying to do with this
Mhm.
element of suffering or whatever? Is it there to just make it? Are you trying to revel in it? Are you trying to use it to say something or whatever? Because suffering is a part of the condition. And what we do with these stories is try to reflect reality or whatever. But I don't think, it applies everywhere. It doesn't apply for every single story. It can be
Mhm.
used. It's a writing tool. Some people use
Yeah.
tools very well. Some people use tools and make a mess.
Mhm.
It's the
Bro.
best way I can say
That's
it.
very true. I like the way you said that.
Mhm.
That some people can use tools
Yeah.
to make a mess too. I like that.
I would never write a story anything like that. I mean, like I feel like I'm a very like I want good things to happen. I want you just a little bit of conflict, but I could never write a story where I just like I put like a character through awful, awful things. I couldn't do it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've talked to a couple people that wrote horror or like wrote like more like dramatized type stuff. And I know like whenever you were talking, the first person I thought of was a Michael G. Williams, who we've interviewed, and you should watch his interview. It was great. But he talked about how like he writes horror with queer people in it because in horror and in queer lives in general, we are looking for a reason to survive. And so like it gives us a representation in horror that we wouldn't get elsewhere because in other movies and other books or whatever, they don't need a reason to survive. They already have one. That kind of things. I think that is interesting because I like the representation, but I also definitely see the sometimes I'm reading a book and I'm like, that makes me feel sick. I'm good. I need to not do that book. Maybe I'll come back in 10 years when I'm mentally stable or not.
Had something and it's
I'm sorry.
gone.
No, I was gonna say I like how you mentioned just queer representation because I feel like that is a huge element of comics as well. I'm a book like I think like not only like the big two, Marvel and DC, but other comic publishers. We are starting to see, especially in the last couple of years, a lot more queer representation. Not only in terms of like characters that are introduced, but like the people that are actually writing it, gay and lesbian authors, artists, non-binary authors, trans artists and writers. It's a very much different area. It's still very heavily skewed towards cishet authors these
Right.
days, but I feel like there have been concentrated efforts in the last couple of years to really lift up voices. Both Marvel and DC do Pride specials where they have people from all across the spectrum, contribute to stories into there. One of my favorite current writers who was attached to one of these, Nicole Maines. I don't know if either of you ever watched the Supergirl show, but she was a
Hmm.
part of Supergirl, and she's actually writing. She was writing a book. I think it's over now, but they had this one character that she actually portrayed on Supergirl, and I think it was an original character. I'm not totally certain, but a character called Dreamer that they integrated into the DC universe. Nicole Maines has essentially been the voice of this character since then. So, you have an original trans character well, not by, but who's written and guided by this trans author who portrayed them, which is very cool. Sort of thing you wouldn't have seen in the comics, like, in the 70s, 60s, 80s, that
Hmm.
sort of generation. But that is a very sort of like now sort of comics thing where I do think like, there is a lot more intentionality in lifting up voices that have historically been ignored or minimized.
That is really cool. I like to see more representation and stuff like that because I feel like that's how we get the amazing different characters. If it's always the same type of people coming up with ideas, they're always going to sound the same, and then eventually we're going to get bored, which is exactly what happened to Marvel.
It's a weird line. It's like I will say they do make earnest attempts. The problem with like comics is that because it is a very fragile ecosystem in terms of sales, essentially, if you're a new character, if you're a new writer, you've got to like have a hit like instantly or whatever. And it happens for a lot of people. It's not just solely for, anyone queer aligned or whatever, but because the system is so fragile, I mean, people have their mainstays, they want to buy their Batman, they want to buy their Spider-Man or whatever. The chances are so little, and not just for queer, but for, for Black artists, writers and creators, for, Asian American artists, writers and creators and characters. They do make these attempts, but when it comes to like long lasting impacts or whatever, it's like if you're not cracking like a hit, like just swinging and hitting instantly, it's kind of like, oh, here's our character for now. They're off to the side. They're cool. They're still here, but we're not going to shine a light on because they didn't sell, and that's just
Mhm.
unfortunate things because the market is so small and
Saturated.
so it has to respond to like what's working or whatever. And if they feel like it's not investment wise to work, they're not going to spend as much time onto it. And it's unfortunate. Because I mean, like
Mhm.
sales shouldn't dictate that sort of stuff, but it does.
Yeah. I'm seeing that a lot in the book world too, like novels and things like that. I joined a lot of groups that were like doing like ARC reading to get the reviews and stuff like that. And like they're they're hardcore about it because if you don't have above a 4 star on Amazon, you're just not getting sales. Like that's just the reality of it. And then if you don't get sales, you're probably not going to get into a bookstore or anything like that. So it's just like but then everything's so saturated because we have people that are knocking out like 5 books a year because I don't know, because they're simple books, I guess. I don't know. And then and then we have Brandon Sanderson over here writing like 500,000 page books a year and we're like, "Okay."
Right. Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's nice to see the parallels.
That did bring me to a question though. Do you feel like, so when you're saying that about like it kind of has to be like a hit and run, is that more just like when introducing a new character into like a preconceived world like Marvel, DC, those kind of things? Or do you feel like within like indie comics as well, like if people come out with their own stories, it's kind of like you have to hit that mark first, or it's just kind of downhill?
Yeah, no, I think the standards are a little different when it comes to indie creator-owned stuff. We are seeing a
Hmm.
lot more success, a lot more differing ideas and representation with those things because with Marvel and DC, it's kind of baked into what people expect, what people want stuff to see. And an unfortunate reality with a lot of like legacy second generation is like people want to see the stuff that they've already seen. It's
Hmm.
comfort. And I will say that there's some writers who try to do new things and it works or whatever, but
Hmm.
it's a lot harder to make change in a universe that changes so slowly. Change is possible in those
Mm,
universes, but it
Hmm.
comes so slowly. And like, even when it's done, I mean, like, you might not see like real positive developments on it like for a while. As far as indie markets
Hmm.
go, that does provide a element where people can do stuff and like there's no real expectation. I mean, you want your comic to be a hit. And I've seen people like I do think with the indie market there's not as much pressure, but the indie market is very saturated. It's very big. It's huge. There's so many like people like, and there's so many different publishers or whatever. I think there are spots available for differing visions for
Hmm.
lesser known and lesser represented characters in the other thing. It's still a very male dominated market, very still white male dominated market, cis
Hmm.
dominated market. Depending on the publisher, and I don't know as much as I am a huge comic fan, I don't know every single notion what their specific output is with their demographics and everything. I do
Right.
think
Yeah.
the indie markets are where you see a lot more. They try things that the other ones aren't, in terms of
Hmm.
genres, of who's writing for them, in terms of things. Inevitably, a lot of these people that write stuff for these smaller things want to move on to the big stuff because that's where I don't want to say where the money is. Because truth be told, I don't know if I'd say that there's money in comics generally, but everybody wants to write for the big guys. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
just natural. I mean, DC came to me like saying like, "Hey, do you want to write?" It's like, "Yes, absolutely." I've got my own ideas, but I'd love to write for DC.
That's amazing. What are your favorite topics to write about or to talk about on your TikTok?
Yeah, so obviously I'm a huge DC fan. It's just, I mean, you guys can tell these are all like DC stuff behind me. Just DC is like that's, I don't know what it is about one specific universe because I try to be like, in every other aspect of my life, I don't like being a brand loyalist. I've
Mhm.
never understood. It was like I can only eat this kind of mayonnaise. I can only, watch. I don't only want to watch this one channel or this one service or whatever. Brand loyalty is never really. I've never understood that. Except when it comes to DC, I just keep going for it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I like the mythology or the universe that's been building up. I don't know if I've
Hmm.
liked the writers and artists that have contributed over the years. But when I'm looking for content, when I need stuff to talk about, I'll just say like, "Hey, what happened in a DC comic this week? This looks fun to talk about." Or, when I'm talking to the people who are responding to my videos, people ask me a question. That's the thing that I didn't really realize when I started making videos is how much I love responding to people's questions.
Mm.
Because I think with comic talk, you have so many people who are new because, I do my writing, but I think
Hmm.
there's a lot more people, especially a lot more younger people who are just getting into comics who don't know the history, who don't know the characters, who don't know the impact of this sort of stuff. And I've seen the breakdown of a lot of my things because TikTok gives you like a little, oh, here's what your followers look like. Over half of my followers are under 30. And
Mm.
I see so many people saying like, what do you recommend for this? Like, is this the story good? So when it comes to like, I think one of the things I really like making is just like, hey, if you like this, let me tell you you might like this or whatever. I love
Hmm.
responding to people and answering their questions and giving them recommendations. Because I think I've always struggled finding a comic community that like I really like. You know what I mean? Truth be told, a lot of like spaces I feel like I just don't know how to vibe in. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm more of a homebody than anything else. You know what I mean? But I like the idea of talking with people and communicating. I know it's like it's just through a screen or whatever, but when I see people saying like, "Hey, this was a really good video. Thank you for responding to me," or "Hey, this is a really good book. I really liked it. Thank you for talking about it." Like that's very fulfilling to me. So that's one of those things I really do like, and I might not know what it is I'm going to be talking about. I'm sometimes just going to TikTok, see if like there's a comment that I want to respond to. It's like, oh, this
Mhm.
could be a good idea. Let me just talk to them directly. So, but it's one of those things that's kind of fulfilling in a way that my writing necessarily wasn't. Not that I'm not fulfilled by my
Hmm.
writing, but I feel like it's two different beasts. Because when I'm doing my writing, I get to go into my more analytical side. I get to be more, I get to go as far into these topics as I want to. Because with TikTok, you have to be not very surface level, but I can't go as deep as I'd want to. But it takes me about, I don't know, to read through one of my article pieces is like, I don't know, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes or whatever. With a TikTok, I have to basically be done in I try to cap it a minute and a half to 2 minutes. It's two different things. And plus, you guys probably figured this out. I talk super fast or whatever, so I have to jam a lot of information into this timeline or whatever. But with the writing, it's the same. I mean, like, again, it all comes down to what's going on in the comic world. Are there bigger things I can talk about? Like again, if I see things that I think are interesting, especially like with the Batman ice sketch or whatever. Now, the thing is, like with my writing, though, I am working for other entities, and I can't exactly. I think that's what exactly happened with the last place I was working at. They didn't want me to like. It's not that they didn't, but I think it's just like let's pause until we actually see how this works out or whatever. But with my writing, I do have to be a little bit more aware that I'm at the behest of my editors. But with my videos, I get to just kind of talk about what I want to talk about. I'm the one in charge of that, which is definitely a lot more freeing. Yeah, I do like also doing like lists, not as much. Well, TikTok wise, I don't do a lot of lists just because I feel like it doesn't engage. But like writing wise, people love lists online. I don't
Yeah.
know what it's about like people just want to see like, I guess it's the easiest and most digestible form of writing. But yeah, apparently like sessions wise, just looking at the viewers that respond to my stuff, 9 times out of 10, that's what they want to read. If I'm going to draw the eyeballs, it's with a list. So go figure.
I
But
love me a list, so
and I mean, like, I get it, because like, if you say like, it's like, oh, here's the 5 best Batman costumes. Here's the 5 top Spider-Man
Mhm.
love interests that didn't work out or whatever. People's like, okay, well, let me just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got it. Perfect. But it draws them in rather than
Yeah.
like, hey, here's a big analytical in-depth and why I think, the recent issue of the Ultimates is a great call out for having us all rise up against the system or whatever. It's not as digestible. People don't want to think as much. And maybe that's
Yeah.
why my TikToks are doing so good. I don't know. I love my TikTok people though. No.
No, I mean, I feel like we go to social media sometimes just to like disassociate from the world, not to think more about it. Like, I love diving into the analytical stuff as well, but like sometimes I'm just like, yeah, tell me which Barbie character I am. I don't care anything. I just want to take a quiz.
I don't know, that's the thing. I don't think I've ever gotten to do like a quiz because like the sites that I've written for, it's always just been mostly like features, news updates, lists, interviews occasionally. But yeah, I've never gotten to like write like a quiz. I feel like I would write the most like sort of it's like what obscure '90s character are you? And you get like a character like it's like oh he's just had a bunch of like spikes on his shoulders and weird hair or whatever because
You should do
a
it.
lot of I yeah I should.
You
That's
should
the
do
thing.
it.
I need to see if we actually do quizzes because I don't know.
Mhm.
I know places like BuzzFeed always were like famous for that. I know other websites
Yeah.
do, but yeah, I don't remember the last time I saw like a quiz online, but I know they're popular, just like
So,
lists.
They're popular. BuzzFeed still does them. And
now you
not
like,
that I would
I'm
know.
taking my quizzes.
I love quizzes so much. I always like when I watch a new TV show, I'm like, which character do I think I am? And then I'm like, I'm gonna take a quiz and see which character they think I am. It does, I don't know. But you could make them and put them on your TikTok too because
That's true.
they're fun. Sorry, go ahead and say
No,
whatever
you're
you were
good.
gonna say originally.
Oh, so I have two things. One, I was gonna say, I love the headspace you have when it comes to social media.
Mhm.
Because you said you've been like doing TikTok and like videos. You said how long?
About 4 months or so. I started right in the summertime.
Yeah, I just think like that is something that's so important when going into it and like also continuing to grow. It's just like remembering that community piece. And it seems like you're really, I don't know, it just seems like you really love the community piece, which is awesome. Cause I think sometimes it can get easy, like as someone who's like, been on social media and like done it. I don't know, it's easy to sometimes feel separated at certain things, which I also did makeup and makeup content. It's a very different world,
Yeah, yeah.
but still like, I don't know. I just think I think the least that the separation is there, the better. No, that sounds wrong because you should have personal space and separation. I don't know. What I'm trying to say
I'm
is
asking.
you have a good headspace and yeah, you should try to preserve that, I guess, because social media is a beautiful thing, but as you know, can also be a
Destructive.
beast.
No, I mean it's true. It's funny you're talking about this because I literally was thinking the same things the other day. There's always drama on TikTok. There's always some sort
Yep.
Mhm.
of this is what's going on right now. And my FYP was just filled recently with one drama. Well, excuse me, it was separate sets of drama actually. You follow one topic, you go down one hole, and then it spun into another
Mhm.
rabbit hole. And it's funny because I do see like because the way the TikTok algorithm works is like you watch one person and then they seem like, oh, you want to watch more of this person or whatever. And
Mhm.
then these people are talking about drama from other people or whatever. So then you get that roped into you. So before
Mhm.
I knew it, I was seeing drama about what are the ethics of like, pirating comics. And then that
Mhm.
spun into, like this one person started a whole flame war due to like saying something like saying comics are for everyone is a privileged statement because the people who say it don't mean it. And I'm like, I don't know. Like there's drama
Sometimes it's
rooted in
like,
other drama. And it's like, I
mhm.
didn't touch it. I didn't respond to it. That's not the
Mhm.
content I made because when I'm
Mhm.
making my comic content, I want my stuff to be by design, my built because of what I believe it should be. And I know people like, get involved in like, responding to drama, stitching it with other people, saying like, hey, this is my thoughts on what this person just said. That's not what I want to do. Could it maybe ingratiate myself into the comic talk community a little bit more? Maybe. Could it help me grow followers a little bit faster? Possibly. But I want my account to stand on its own. I want the
Mhm.
followers who come to choose me because they like my content, not because I had a own to this one person or I had like, my own
Mhm.
statement that went viral. Cause the last thing I want is, I want my content to go viral. I don't want, like me, like, dissing somebody else. Cause I was like, that's not
Mhm.
representative of me. I want the stuff that I
Right.
believe in to represent me. You know what I mean? And it has. And I think my best video so far is like 80,000 views or something, which small in some regards. I mean, I know there's people like, millions and millions of views or whatever, but for me, that was personal. That was a personal victory. So yeah, I want to engage with people who are following me and reading my stuff or watching my stuff. Well, and yeah, reading my stuff too, but watching my videos
Mhm.
because I know that they're there for that. I know that they're here for me and my analysis, and that's why I want to interact with them. That's why I want to, say, like, hey, I appreciate you following me. I appreciate you asking me these questions. Let me engage with you a little bit more. That's more
Mhm.
healthy, I believe, than just responding to drama for the sake of drama or getting views or
Mhm.
hits or whatever. While I would like this to be a fantastic brand achievement to be like the sort of thing that I could like, just cash in on and just make money
Mhm.
off of that. I'm treating this like a hobby. I'm treating this like this is
Mhm.
what I want to do because I like it. And the moment I
Mhm.
start, doing stuff just to chase follower counts for whatever reason, I've lost that's when I lose the plot.
Yeah,
And
Right.
it's like you
exactly.
said, it's not healthy. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
it's the embodiment of the problems people say social media is, you know what I mean? And I want to
Mhm.
do what I'm doing in counter to that. I don't want, to just start drama or participate in drama just because it's what's going on.
So what you're saying is art is a protest.
Yeah, it is a protest. It could be in any kind of protest you want. It's
Um,
yeah. And that's the funny thing
um,
is that, I feel like with the community, like we all do have the sort of same passions and everything. We all do sort of like
mhm,
the same things, but it's the way people want to engage, like, that's gonna ultimately give you the experience that you get out of it. It's what you put in is what you get out, that sort of stuff. And for me,
mhm.
he's like, yeah, I want to focus on the arts. I want to talk about, this sort of stuff. I want to do talking to these like themes that I think are so good and everything. But yeah, man, the moment I start, veering towards the drama, it's like, nope, this is the line in the sand. You're not going to get me to
Uh-huh.
start talking about just because you got
That's
two
so
cents
real.
doesn't mean you need to cash it.
That's real. That mhm.
I'm keeping that and putting it in
Same.
my pocket.
Take it.
The other thing that is very off topic that I was gonna say is one of like my personal experience with comics. So, like I said, I haven't read a lot. I have like the Starfire collection because I'm obsessed with
Oh
Starfire.
yeah, yeah.
Other than that, like I haven't read a lot, but I found myself, especially I used to a lot more and I need to go back. But like one of my favorite places to get inspiration for makeup is a comic book store.
Uh-huh.
And like going through all the different comics and like looking at the new characters or like the indie comics because the character designs are just always so I don't know, just like different. I feel like there's always like there's so much variety and they're so out of this world because I mean it is another world most times.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what my point is in bringing that up other than
You have a connection to
I have
comics.
a connection to it and I have a connection to I don't know. I like the art of
Yeah, no, and I
the
think
visual art.
you're touching on something really important because I think, art is the reason. I mean, because I'll say this, I approach comics as a writer because I'm a writer myself and I can,
Mhm,
analyze art. But comics wouldn't be comics without the art or whatever. And for some
mhm,
people, like, that's the crux. That's what
mhm,
draws them in. I mean, like, they say not to judge a book by its cover, but that's 9 times out of 10 what the artist is doing with a lot of their comics and
mhm,
everything. But no, art really can be inspiring in a lot of different ways. I mean, I've seen just directly. I'm not so much into the makeup sphere or whatever, but I can
mhm,
definitely see that. But cosplayers, you should see the way that a lot of these people who live and breathe and die that sort of stuff, just the way that they bring
mhm,
these visions to life. And it's honestly amazing because the character designs that people do for characters, especially the wild ones. You're mentioning Starfire. I mean, like she's got a great character design just with the giant
mhm,
flaming hair, the green eyes, the orange skin. It's just
mhm,
so much of it is just like good looking, you know what I mean? And,
mhm,
seeing the way that people like, bring that to life is so cool. And I know there's like a contingent of like people who don't necessarily engage with comics in the sense that I engage with them, but they do
mhm,
engage in the sense that like they can appreciate this art and everything.
mhm.
And, the last thing I'm going to do is say like, oh, we're not a real fan if you just like the art. It's like, well, the art
Yeah,
is the comic. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, so they don't read. I mean, who's judging people based on how much they read comics or whatever is the stupidest thing I
Mhm,
can think of. You know what I mean? The fact that, you can look at these things in any way and take appreciation for them makes you a comic fan, in my opinion.
yeah.
Heck, people who like
Oh,
the movies, like, I mean, I don't consider them any less fans than anything else. I might be the person to say, like, well, actually, in the comics, that's as far as I go. You know what I mean? I won't
yeah.
judge you for, not reading them. I'll just say, like,
Mm,
comics are better. But
well,
Who is your favorite character overall?
that is a question.
That is a question.
No, no, I mean, it's a good question because it's like, I mean, I love so many of them. I mean, like, and I also feel like if you would ask me this question at different stages of my life, I'd have a different answer because, like I
Yeah.
said, the inspiration from, my youth was Batman. That's the character
mm,
that brought me in. And now the last several years, and this isn't just because, the movie just came out because I was waiting for it for months, but Superman honestly became my hero at some point, and I don't remember when. Might have been somewhere in the mid 2000 teens, just because that's about the time I started like backtracking and reading a whole bunch of like Superman comics. But honestly, the movie really did kind of show the world, like, because for a while, I was like, hey, Superman's actually a really good character. And you're met with like, it's kind of boring. When's the last good Superman movie? I
mm,
mean, like, and yeah, we didn't really get a lot of like great Superman content. Smallville might have been okay. I could never really get into it.
I loved it. Michael Rosenbaum was the best Lex Luthor.
He was a good Lex. Yes, I'll give him
He
that.
was so good.
But no, like with the movie, I appreciated that movie so much because I mean, it really did kind of embody everything that I loved about that character. Just the altruism, the selflessness, the imperfections. I mean, like, I think people who say Superman is just too perfect a character, again, I don't want to say that they don't know anything about the character, but it's just like that's a misconception, you know? And I
Mhm.
like that it didn't shy away from that sort of stuff. Maybe he can be a little bit too, too idealized, a little bit too, naive or whatever. But, at the end of the day, he really is just this character that embodies good wholesomeness in a world that kind of is growing increasingly cynical. You know what I mean? Like I feel you look at the past couple decades, more people are becoming aware of, like, the inequalities of this world. They're becoming a little bit more, it's just darker with the kind of, like, stuff we've seen. I mean, just like even just looking around nowadays or whatever. But a character like Superman, somebody who is embodying, like, being good towards others, embodying, like, selflessness, altruism, that's the sort of stuff I feel like has only made him a better character in the eyes of people. And that's why I think, people saw that movie and it's like, oh wow, no, this guy is the hero that we need. You know what I mean? Because, like, back in the day, you had Batman. I remember when the Chris Nolan Batman movies came out. It's like, yeah, he's so dark, he's so badass, he's so awesome or whatever. He's so cool. We've had enough badass darkness. You know what I mean? Because, like, you hear badass darkness, you start to raise little eyebrows. Like, okay, what's so bad? What's so awesome about that? I mean, people being dark and violent and stuff. But yeah, as a character, Superman is just somebody who, I love just for not only the stories that they have been in. I've read so many good Superman stories. So many great authors have written that character. But yeah, again, just what he stands for has just been like a
Mhm.
character that as I've gotten older, I've appreciated more and more. Which again, if you had told me that, when I was a kid, I'd be like, no, Batman rules. And Batman's good. He's a good character, but I don't know. Another character that I also have grown, like, a much more appreciation for as I've gotten older is Wonder Woman. Obviously, you can see I've
Mm,
got this little poster here from one of her earliest appearances. Wonder Woman is a character, like, I feel was kind of the reason I just wasn't was probably, like, unconscious biases that I didn't know existed or whatever. But once I actually started engaging with really good Wonder Woman
Mhm.
stories, I'm like, this character is amazing. Why have I not been reading this character more? Because honestly, like, badass warrior, but one of the most genuine people in this world. You know what I mean? Somebody who literally loves everyone or whatever. And it's just it's a fine thing to write, but the right authors who have written this character have written some of the best comics I've ever written. One of the best comics on the
mhm,
stands right now is Absolute Wonder Woman. Tying back into that Absolute stuff I was saying earlier,
Mhm.
it's a story where, hey, what if Wonder Woman was raised in hell instead of on an island with all Amazon warriors, but she's still the same person. She's got all this, like, dark witch magic or whatever, but she's still, like, a really good
Mm.
person or whatever. It's honestly the most interesting idea and the best Wonder Woman comic.
Mhm.
It's even outselling the main Wonder Woman comic, which I find so funny, but I won't dive into the whole peculiarities of that.
I think it is interesting to delve into media of the times and use that to like the popularity of the stuff to be
Mhm.
like, oh, well, it was very popular for this amount of time to be into really dark stuff. Like about the time that like the really dark Batman came about, it led into like things like the vampires and this like it like around that same time, like why did we like the bad boy, but like really
Mhm.
super creepy also kind of. And then like I think you're right. I think we're leading into a lighter area because we kind of have to disassociate from the darkness of the world, right? I think, like, obviously, we all hated English class whenever they were like, why are the curtains blue? But, like, at the same point, like, well, the curtains actually do matter because there was a while where they didn't have curtains. Like, curtains didn't exist before this time, or like whatever. Like, it does still tell you so much about our society. So now I'm going to delve into that for the next 10 years. It's cool.
You're right. I mean, like, all forms of art are reflective of the times that they are created in.
Mhm.
And I think the cool thing about comics is because they come out at a faster rate, it is not a much more accurate reflection, but you do get to kind of see, like, things responding. Because I mean, a movie can be in production for like 2 years or whatever, and it's hard to predict what are people's thoughts and feelings on that. Like, I mean, like, it could be prescient. It could be like, it's like, oh, hey, maybe it's a little bit of advance of its times. It could be right on the times, or at worst, people are already, like, kind of moving past that sort of thing or whatever. And 2 years is like a minimum. I think sometimes movies can be in production for 3, 4 years or whatever.
Mhm.
So unless you're, writing a story with, like, a really timeless sort of value, it's very hard.
Mhm.
A comic
Mhm.
can come out in, like, about 3 months. I mean, maybe there's a little bit more, background work or whatever they're not familiar with, but they can get out comics super quick now. And
Mhm.
I think they really do kind of, like, you see just topics that are very, like, popular, like stuff that, like, you'll see not references necessarily, but just sort of like, hey, this just happened and now people are responding. This is the sort of vibe we're seeing. And you see, like, impact and influence the comics themselves, which I think is really cool because I think the only thing that can really do that as far as, like, television or media is probably South Park. That's probably the closest I can think of just
Mm,
because they're capable of
Mhm.
getting, like, something out
Mhm.
that around. But
they are very fast.
I mean, with comics though, like, you got like, I guess, a different school of ideas rather than just
Mhm,
strictly South Park and how they present their
mhm,
messaging, which sometimes it hits the mark, sometimes it doesn't. It really just depends. But, the
mhm,
best thing you can say is that they get it out quickly. But comics can do that too.
That actually, I don't that's a good question that came to my mind or brought a good question to my mind. What is the average rate that, like, comics go out? Like, what is there an average of, like, it's this often? Does that make
Oh,
sense?
like how many how many issues or like what we like because it really depends. I mean, like, so you've got
Yeah.
like ongoing series, like
Mhm,
your Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, that sort of stuff. The mainstays that are just they're always going to be around. Those are monthly.
mhm,
Traditionally, comics are monthly.
okay.
Same for
Yeah, I guess that's
miniseries,
what I was getting at.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, miniseries could have like 6 issues, 7 issues or whatever.
Mhm,
And barring any delays, usually you should finish up half a year or however like long if it's like 5 issues, it just come out in about 5 months. Sometimes you'll get a comic that might come out bi-monthly, like twice a month or whatever. It's rare, but
mhm,
it happens just because I feel like writers can do stuff a lot faster just because you're really putting a script together. But artists need time
mhm,
to create in about
mhm,
a month. Now, some artists are beasts and they can create
mhm.
like just lightning speed. It's honestly amazing because I've seen like some artists do like 3, even 4 books, and that's monthly. You know what
Wow.
I mean?
Mhm,
But some artists, they might need a little bit more time or whatever. So it's rare you see a comic that just kind of comes out when it feels like it because you want to stay like on top of things. But that's I think when you lead
mhm,
into the more indie market,
mhm,
because with the big two like Marvel and DC, they'll do a lot of like fill-in writers if an artist is like falling behind, like a fill-in artist, I
yeah,
meant fill-in artist if an artist is falling behind a little bit. But with an indie comic, if it's by one artist who was part of a creative team and it's their book,
mhm,
then, they might skip a month. So just then
mhm,
catch up. Really just depends. But traditionally, yeah, comics are monthly. There is situations where we are getting like, I think weekly updates because I know a lot are trying to veer more towards the webtoon model,
Mm,
which I'm not a huge fan of like vertical scrolling comics, but no, that's just me. I can appreciate them from getting people interested in the comics, but I think those can
mhm,
come out a little bit faster just because
mhm.
they're more like bite-sized nuggets of comics. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to
Yeah,
kind of get those out to the people. But if it works to get people reading comics, I'm all for it. I don't care.
I love that.
real. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for, like, letting us into your world today. Was there anything
Yeah.
else you wanted to mention before we hit that hour mark?
No, not really. I mean, like I've got obviously anybody that wants to check out, the comic TikTok, Coyote Gospel. That's at the Coyote Gospel. If you guys want to check it out, appreciate a follow. Just checking out, just watching the videos, liking, all that sort of stuff would be cool. I do have a comic that I'm working on. I got 2 completed issues. It's not done yet, so I really can't
Mhm.
say too much more about it yet. But gonna be doing a Kickstarter for it next year, hopefully to get
Ooh,
that out.
it's
I
exciting.
don't know. Maybe I'll revisit you guys saying like, "Hey, here's that Kickstarter I was talk to you
Yes,
about so
please
long ago."
do.
But
Definitely for sure.
no, this was fun. Other than that, just this was fun. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you
Of
so much
course. I'm
again.
really glad you came. I loved seeing you. I was like, okay, I'm really bad with names, but I was like,
Thank you so much again.
yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. It was
thank you
nice chatting
guys.
with you again.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Queer Vision, where we, Becca and
Korea.
got to sit down with Justin Epps and talk a lot about comics and really honestly learned so much and had a lot of fun. And now we kind of want to go through a rabbit hole and listen to media and understand media. So
By we, her. I just want to read comics now because, like, I haven't allowed myself into, like, over 2 years.
you should go follow Justin on TikTok at the Coyote Gospel. That's TheCoyoteGospel. For those of us that didn't know how to spell coyote, that'd be me. Anywho, yeah, I didn't know how to spell coyote. Um, but you should go follow Justin. You should learn some stuff about comics. You should get into comics. And yeah, I'm glad you were here today. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can go to queerlana.org or the Queer Vision Mag or Nasty Queer on Instagram, or you can go to our website, queerlana.org, to find all of our events and so much more information about us, like our magazine.
Yes, magazine.
It's
Which,
monthly.
if y'all are not aware, every single one of these interviews are in a magazine with pictures as well. Yes, I know you love pictures. Yeah,
You should also sign up for an interview.
yeah.
You should do that,
And buy the magazine,
but also sign up for the interview.
but like the
Or maybe
magazine.
maybe put
Maybe,
something in the art in the magazine.
maybe just do everything.
You should do things.
Help someone out. What happened to community care?
That was a little crazy. Okay.
Okay,
I
we'll
hope
see
you have a really good day. Love you. Bye.
I'm 2 years old. That's because I really needed to fart, but I can't let it out. So I had to metaphorically do it
I'm
to
really
soothe
appreciating you
myself.
not doing
Yeah,
it.
you're welcome.
I'll do the outro quick so you can fart when I leave.
It's better than you squeezing your balls in it. Not. Stop. Wait, I found my new TikTok thing. That's going to make me go viral. Open up now. I'm going to brush your teeth, nasty. Oh my God. Look at all that plaque coming off. That's bad. Thanks for the heart. Thanks for the heart. Thanks for the hot dog, you hungry bitch. You know how they do? You don't remember that era? Thanks for the hot dog. You never saw these people?
You know the grapefruit lady?